I can't imagine what I would be doing had the theater not been there.
We need to express ourselves, and we need to understand ourselves by seeing a reflection of ourselves.
And the Chetco players were right there behind me, helping me get through it all. So we are a family.
We want to talk to you about the Chetco Pelican players,
how they got started,
how they struggled,
and how they persevered.
In this series, we're taking a look at CPP's 33-year history of live theater in the Brookings-Harbor community. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning.
Along with the people who lived through it. I'm Catlin Temple.
And I'm Mason McKinney, standing in for Jason Liddell.
And this is The Green Room.
Episode 2, Becoming a Family, 1991 through 2000.
So here's where the theater enters a time period Mason and I are a bit more familiar with, the 90s.
Well, sort of. We were babies in 1991, but we remember some things, don't we?
Grunge music got popular.
The internet started taking off.
And for the very first time, scientists successfully cloned a sheep. Its name was Dolly. It was kind of a big deal.
A lot was going on in the 90s, and the same holds true for the Chetco Pelican players.
By 1991, they had a dedicated performance space of their own at the Performing Arts Center in Harbor. And it had a major perk that their temporary homes never had before, namely lots of space.
Yeah, we built about a 1 foot and a half raised stage on the floor under this catwalk, which was a permanent ceiling height of 8 feet. But it gave us a 20 by 20 foot stage with little wing space on the sides.
We had a much bigger backstage area with that one.
But we built raised stadium theater seating and put in a light booth above that. And that was all done by Andy and Carl and a couple of other people who swung hammers. And
it was still a rental, though, and all rented buildings have their quirks.
One of the biggest problems we had with it was that it had a permanent skylight and it let all this light in. So, 2 or 3 times a year we'd have to paint it black?
Oh, I can't even tell you how many times I painted it.
Yeah, we'd have to paint it. And if it rains, oh my gosh, it made a lot of noise because it's glass. And you'd be performing on stage and we have a sudden downpour and nobody can hear anything.
But one night when they had a terrible rainstorm in there, and then it got really cold, it froze the sprinkler system inside the building. So the landlord downstairs was D&B and a dressing store, and we got a call that the water was running in. So the sprinklers had broken inside the theater itself. But when we opened the outside doors to get in, we had nothing but 4 feet of water flow out. But it did not damage our lighting system at all. So we were pleased at that. We put umbrellas over the lighting system until they got the sprinkler system fixed.
Quirks and all, they were taking a look at their lineup of shows, and people like Mike Moran were starting to dream big.
And after we did about 5 melodramas, I pushed the board and said, let's try a musical. And everybody was kind of gung-ho. We were feeling pretty secure in ourselves by that time. And we did Sound of Music.
And I thought, wow, talk about jumping into the deep end of the pool. Because that's a very challenging musical. There's a lot involved in that one. But we've pulled it off twice now.
The Sound of Music opened in June of '91, and it really pushed the limits of what they'd previously thought was possible.
But it turned out to be a heck of an undertaking, but a great production, and really helped cement the theater company in town.
But the thing about those glitzy, big-ticket musicals, they require a lot of people. So when they set their seasons, they always tried to schedule them in the summer.
And that, of course, was always to get the kids when they were out of school and get the teenagers. Because your normal musicals have 15, 20, 25 actors in them.
We tracked down one of those child actors to ask them what it was like back then.
Hi, my name is Matt McVay. I was involved with CPP for almost 10 years, I think.
Once Matt got bit by the theater bug in 1992, he was pretty much hooked.
Oliver was a big one, and then after that, if I can remember all the different ones, and because I loved being involved with the theater. Yeah, Christmas Carol was one. Hans Christian Andersen, Fiddler on the Roof. I was asking them constantly, like, if there's kids in this show, please let me know. I'm going to audition for it.
He was hooked enough that he eventually made a career in show business. He's been acting and producing both on stage and in film since his 20s.
But the people who are truly passionate about it never forget their first time on stage. And he remembers his first show, Oliver, particularly well.
Bob Ward, who directed Oliver, I would give a lot of credit to him just in the sense of really getting me outside my comfort zone to even do the show. Like, I had just seen a show at it was the Christmas show the year before, and ever since seeing that, and I saw there's other kids doing this, I really want to do it. But up until that point, I'd been really shy. I wouldn't talk in class or anything. I was always quiet at home. That was the spark, was just even getting cast in the show. So I auditioned for Oliver, and I was the understudy when it first got cast. And I don't know what the exact story was with who originally got the part, but for some reason it was either stage fright or some other reason that they ended up dropping out, making me the lead for that. And I kind of feel like had that not happened, it just kind of threw me into it.
And once he was thrown into it, he found himself surrounded by a lot of equally passionate people. Along with some great high school teachers and other influences, he found a lot of inspiration to pursue his dream to act with his fellow cast and crew members at CPP.
Going back to Oliver, I got to see everybody doing everything. So it was watching how costumes got made, watching the set get built, coming in and helping build the set, which is all stuff that, I continued doing throughout high school and college and any other time I was involved in theater in LA. It was always that kind of community hands-on type thing to where I wanted to do everything. I wanted to know how, how the whole thing was put together. That show with, Leanne McCurley was always watching out for me and, helping me. Nancy Carson, Bill Dwinell, who played Fagin in Oliver, he was amazing to watch. And, even as a kid, I could just tell, he was having fun, but it was just such an amazing, fun character to watch.
And Matt pointed out that one of the things that can keep kids involved in community theater is the comfort of familiar faces.
Dr. Kevin Johns, who played Bill Sykes, was one of my best friend's dad. So, having the villain be someone that, I knew really well, it was just such a great thing. I think I came into it really well. That's this scary villain is someone that I know who's a very nice man.
So Matt had a lot of mentors at CPP. And one of the mentors he mentioned was Nancy Pearce Carson.
My name is Nancy Pearce Carson, and I have been involved in the theater till 2013. I'm one of the 7 members that started that theater.
Nancy is the kind of person who can accomplish anything she sets her mind to.
Well, I started in the theater, like I said, back when I was 15. What happened was, in high school, I took a drama class, and I'm one of those people that don't tell me, no, I can't do it. My drama teacher was not that impressed, even though I played the part of Gooch in Auntie Maine on stage in my high school.
Instead of letting her drama teacher get her down, she went out in the world and got some real experience.
So when I turned 16, I joined the Contra Costa Musical Theater. And I went from there and did plays and eventually worked my way to Circle of the Round in Redwood City, California. And so I basically was a dancer.
And by the 90s, Nancy was busy not just acting in shows, but directing, producing, costuming, and doing choreography for many of the giant musicals CPP put on at the time.
And she's a bit modest about her dance background when it comes to teaching, but we think practical experience counts for a lot.
Like the rest of the founding members, her CPP roots start with a lot of melodramas.
You know, the plays that in the beginning we were doing were all melodramas.
Mm-hmm.
And all my parts were the heroine.
The ingenue.
Oh, yeah.
But like Mike and Marianne, she was happy when CPP started diversifying its seasons in the early 90s.
So I kind of wanted to get away from them. I did do a couple of comedies, and then I just got into the point of directing. And I was probably best known and still is because I still get emails from some of my thespian players to say, we want to do another Nonsense, because I started the sequels to Nonsense. The other one that was probably the most challenging and the most one that I liked was when I directed Miracle Worker.
And after a few years, they fell into a groove that worked for them for quite a while.
We developed a season where the first show every year was, I believe, a comedy.
Right.
The second show every year was a drama. The third show was a musical. The fourth show was a melodrama. And then we had a Christmas show.
And we stayed with that for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, that was the standard.
It was a great time for learning at CPP. Everyone from community theater veterans to former film and Broadway actors were collaborating and sharing their experiences.
And one of those pros is still around and still teaching CPP actors on projects from time to time. We're going to talk to him about his early days with CPP after a quick break.
Hey guys, we've had an amazing time putting together the Green Room these last few months. And we're working hard to give everyone who wants an opportunity to tell their stories.
The next era we're going to look at is the early 2000s. If you were involved in theater around that time, and especially if you remember the move from the Harbor Shopping Center to our current location, we would love to hear from you.
But even if you're not from that time period, we'd love to get an interview with you for the archives or for a future episode. If you'd like to do an interview for the Green Room, you can reach out to Jason Liddell on Facebook or by sending him an email at jasonliddell91@gmail.com. Let us know your name and some of your favorite shows to work on, and we'll get you on the schedule in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, that's it. Let's get back to the show. We mentioned earlier that CPP has attracted some people with professional backgrounds over the years. For example, Beatrice Drago was a classically trained singer.
And there was also Bill Gibson. He spent time on Broadway before he came to Brookings, and he played Tevye in the 1995 production of Fiddler on the Roof. That show had one of the biggest casts in CPP's history. The cast was so big, in fact, that it compromised the integrity of their little stage.
Yeah, that stage was bouncing up and down when they were dancing. It was particularly difficult keeping those bottles on top of their heads when the Jews took over.
That voice that you're hearing belongs to Michael Fox. He's been involved with CPP since 1995.
I showed up one morning to help Andy and Carl build sets for Arsenic and Old Lace. I've done just about everything, including cleaning toilets.
And he brings his professional background in acting and directing to every CPP production he's helped with. He's either directed, assistant directed, or produced a lot of the big-name shows CPP put on at the time, like Fiddler on the Roof and Annie Jr., as well as more intimate projects like Mr. Flannery's Ocean.
Like a lot of artists, he's got a lot of respect for people who constantly seek perfection.
I watched this one program one time on Picasso, and they had a clear glass plate, and they gave Picasso a magic marker, and they said, okay, just go ahead and just paint something with that marker. And he started, and he just kept going. He just kept going. He kept improving. At any one point, you could have said, stop, that's great. But he just kept wanting to improve on it. He couldn't stop until someone actually said, stop, okay, that's it, finished. That's the, I think, the urge for the true artist, is you always are looking for somehow to make it better. And as you say, it could be months or years down the road, and you go, oh, that thing I did, now I know how I could have improved it.
But he was also as heavily involved as he was because he loves to teach almost as much as he loves to create.
I started working with kids. My first experience with theater was, well, we won't go back to third grade, but really my first experience with theater when I was about 15. And I had gotten a job at a sleepaway camp in upstate New York. And the person leading the drama department at that camp, the man was a consummate professional. And I learned from a professional on how to put theater together from the start. I mean, I learned how to make rocks out of chicken wire and wood and paper and paint. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started from. And at the time also, I never really considered theater as any kind of a career option for me. I was doing social work for a while. I was interested in political science. And then eventually I got, as a friend of mine said, got bit by the bug when I got to Washington State and started up in college. That's when I really got a little more serious about theater.
Even outside of the professional realm, Michael sees the value in community theater, especially as a way to fill gaps in arts education that not all public schools have the resources to fill.
You know, the music and the theater and all of those artistic elements have been so stripped away from the schools over the years that it's made me want to bring it back in some sort of way, even if I couldn't inject it into an educational system. So the community theater has that ability. It brings in novices. It brings in people initially. Again, they don't necessarily have to continue with a life in the theater, but sometimes you need an artistic expression for yourself. I think everybody needs an artistic expression, and community theater allows that.
What Michael's getting at is a problem that's impacted people like Matt McVay directly. And in 2000, when Matt was in high school, the theater was there for him and his peers when they needed more support than the schools alone could provide.
Where like school was saying like acting isn't a career, like you need to figure out like what a career is. And I was looking things up and like, okay, well, you know, acting is fun, but like I could look at being a vet or I can look at doing this or that. And it was like a couple years that I was figuring that was not going to be the case. And then in high school, when I started doing theater again, and then I did a show, Life with Father, at Checo Pelican Players, when the theater program got shut down in the high school for like half a year. So all of us went and did the show at Checo Pelican Players at that point. And I think it was around that time that it was like, that's when I really started thinking, like, in talking to a lot of people in the theater that had gone and done stuff professionally, that it's a real career and you could do it. And that's kind of what set me on this track that I'm still going on today.
And those people who had a passion for teaching and working with kids, Michael Fox, Bob Ward, Nancy Pearce, Leanne McCurley, and many, many others, had a direct impact on the kids they worked with. And people like Matt McVay directly benefited from their support, even as far back as Matt's first experience with Oliver in 1992.
Because that first experience was so good and everyone was so nice and so like willing to work with, I mean, not just me, like all the kids, and it was such a welcoming community. Like it's why I stayed and I wanted to keep going to it. And I mean, that's what fueled me wanting to continue and pursue doing this.
And the earlier you lay that welcoming groundwork, the better.
I think it's very important as a director to set the tone in that first rehearsal, that first meeting you have. And that really sets up what's going to happen. But it also sets up the mood that people come into rehearsals and how they take on their roles. And I really loved how the kids took to the parts in The Wizard of Oz. It was just really fun being with them. I really enjoyed that experience a great deal.
You heard so much from Michael and Matt today because, well, once you get them talking about theater, it's pretty hard to get them to stop. Between the two of them, we got enough recorded audio to fill 3 or 4 episodes. And it's no wonder. To them, the performing arts aren't just a hobby, it's their life's work. And while the trajectory of their careers may look different from the average person who walks into a CPP audition, it just made sense to look at the stories of these 2 men side by side. 2 different people who walked through the doors of the Harbor Performing Arts Center at vastly different ages, for vastly different reasons, involved in vastly different ways. We have one perspective from someone who felt compelled to be a mentor, and another who found the inspiration to pursue their dreams thanks in large part to an entire family of mentors who had his back. And no matter where they got their start, or what they value most about the arts, maybe the Chetco Pelican players were as passionate as they were in the 90s because they all felt they were part of something bigger than themselves. And as much as theater has benefited them on a personal level, that mindset also has the potential to trickle out and lift up the entire community.
I think in some ways fortunate to have the Oregon Shakespeare Festival not too far away from here. But I think you'd be surprised at how many people don't even go that far. Mm-hmm. So you really need the arts within those small communities. I think it's just a part of our human nature. We need to express ourselves, and we need to understand ourselves by seeing a reflection of ourselves.
I can't imagine what I would be doing had the theater not been there. It's something everyone should experience. Not only just for that experience, but to see someone in your community that is putting themselves out there. The community theater is just incredibly important, and I think if people don't know why, they should come see a show.
I lost my mother in a fire, and there was a lot of cleanup work, and the Chetco players were right there behind me, helping me get through it all. So we are a family.
On the next episode of The Green Room, the 2000s present a challenge, and the theater fights for its survival.
You need to raise money to keep going, but people don't want to sell the hot dogs and do the car washes, and we did all sorts of things in order to keep the theater going.
It was really a juggling act in order to get that money to keep flowing through the theater to pay the bills.
The theater loses one building, and it finds another. But they also try some new ideas, and find new blood along the way.
Actors would start coming down to hang out in our cabaret.
Mary's all, get that guy off stage! Get him off stage right now!
But are new ideas and new blood enough to keep the arts alive? We'll find out, along with the people who live through it.
There was always just kind of this excitement about, like being in the green room, or, just like waiting backstage and having to be like incredibly quiet, or in the old theater going like across the stage on that catwalk. I loved doing that, and I was always like stand there and try and watch the show from down below, or from up above, and someone would always be yelling at me to get to one side or the other. You're not supposed to stay in the middle.